I think relationships is one of the areas that probably didn't need any more fuel to the fire when it came to a highlight reel.
Yeah.
Right? Because I think that from cartoons to movies to shows, they've depicted almost a reality that doesn't truly exist.
We're posting on Instagram or posting different highlights of our relationship. Most people aren't going to know the behind the scenes of our relationship. And so the narrative could be that, well, Naomi and Ken, they just got it all together.
Right.
Child, please.
So we had all this pre-planning. We had the photographer there. We're paying by the hour. And we get to location. It's under construction.
No! A healthy relationship doesn't always have to look like it is healthy all the time, because then that would be a lie too. Like, you know, sometimes you get a scratch and you put a Band-Aid over it and that heals and then you're good, right? And so it's not that you have the cleanest bill of health, right? But it's just that there's a recognition that sometimes there's scrapes here and there.
That's
and how do you know, address that?
I've been sitting here thinking about all the things you do to me, how you make me feel. I'm wondering if it's the same for you.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, I think I'm good too. Let me get just situated. Okay. Hey, Old Souls community.
What's up? How y'all doing?
We're back.
It's
your girl Naomi.
And I'm Ken.
And we're starting part 2 of episode 1.
Episode 1.
As you can notice, there's been a change of
outfits.
We had some technical difficulties. We were recording part 2.
Yeah, right.
And we experienced some technical difficulties, so we just had to
good old-fashioned re-record.
Right. But we're excited to get into this episode because last time we kind of left off with a little bit of a cliffhanger where, you know, we were talking about how you're no longer on Instagram.
Right.
And, you know, so kind of left it so that we can discuss, you know, kind of what led up to that. And more than just you not being on Instagram, there's been kind of like this season prior to you leaving Instagram, kind of like you were changing your captions.
Right.
You were wanting to convey something a little bit differently as it related to relationships. And so we kind of want to hear the why behind that.
Right.
And so, you know, let's get into it.
Okay. I mean, because I think for me with leaving Instagram, like you said, there's a different reason than like why I started changing how I posted.
Right.
And I think that one of it was like this aspect of understanding the space of IG and what it was becoming. Right. It's almost like similar like Twitter, like back in the day, you know, you would, or even like Facebook, like there was this aspect you might post a status, what you're doing, I'm eating.
Literally.
Right. There was like a level of innocence to how everybody approached social media that no longer exists now. Like there's this business, there's a branding, there's a lot that goes into when people post, why people post. And so the natural authenticity can sometimes be blurred and it can turn into like a highlight reel, right? Where people are posting some of the best pictures they've taken. They're posting some of the best experiences they've had. And social media has blown up in that regard, and relationships have just been along for the ride.
Right.
And I think relationships is one of the areas that probably didn't need any more fuel to the fire when it came to a highlight reel. Yeah. Right. Because I think that from cartoons to movies to shows, they've depicted almost a reality that doesn't truly exist. Right. Not that there aren't happy moments, not that there isn't even happy endings, if you wanted to say that, but they dilute it to this, like you said, this fairy tale. Right. And so I noticed that when we would post a picture of different things, like obviously we'll get likes and comments, but I started noticing a pattern with with other of our friends that are in relationships, and you could see like, all right, they might post a picture, right? And like, I know like right before that they were arguing, right? But like the picture itself presented a reality of happiness, of zeal that is true at moments, but also the arguments and all these other pieces were true as well. And social media isn't the place to be vulnerable. Right. It isn't the place to be transparent that you got into an argument. But there was an aspect that when I wanted to post a pic, I kind of wanted to give more context in the typical caption of like, me and my ace, or y'all could never, or whatever the typical captions can be. I wanted to give a little bit more context to the picture. And the reason being is because I just thought this aspect of like, we live our lives out, whereas in you post a picture, it's just a snapshot. And I think that can skew how people perceive not only relationships in general, but our own relationship. And so that's kind of what fueled like why I began to post longer captions. And at first I didn't think people would read it. But then when I saw people's comments and I might get a few text messages, I saw that it was actually, touching people in a way that I didn't think they would be touched. Right. So like, man, I never thought of that, or man, that was such a great perspective. And it became almost like my way of telling a story to people.
So let's go into kind of like even like, let's say the background of, like you said, at first, we were posting photos. For sure. Probably the first, 5 years of a relationship, right. Just kind of like, like you said, with the typical caption, maybe, it's a little bit about, maybe it's our anniversary, or maybe we've gone somewhere, whatnot. And so we, we're showing each other love on that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I guess there's this element, like you said, where telling a little bit more of the story. Why did you feel like that was like necessary? So give us an example, like, could you give an example of like what that looked like in terms of like the caption, like, and why you felt it was important to tell what was happening behind the scenes?
Right. I mean, that's important. I mean, one of the examples that comes to my mind was, it was actually, I posted, how like you could post multiple pictures in one. I don't even know what it's called. I sound like an old person. Okay, a carousel, right? So I posted a carousel, right? And one picture was from our wedding invitations, and then the other picture was when your sister Jory and Dom came down and stayed with us, and we was going to go to Six Flags. And so I had those two pictures, and both of those pictures, I mean, we look fire. Like, we look good, right? It seemed like a normal picture, one for our wedding invitations and the other at Six Flags. And the picture, I wanted to tell like the context prior to these images being snapped, right? And so when it came to the actual images of us taking the wedding photography, right before that, the original place that we had located to take the pictures was under construction. So we had all this pre-planning. We had the photographer there. We're paying by the hour. Right. And we get to location, it's under construction, right? We're downtown DC. It's hard to find parking. So we're walking around. It's humid. It's messing up your hair. And so there's all these different pieces going on. You have people that, I don't know if it was prom at that time, but it was some people taking pictures as well, like a bunch of kids and all this other stuff. And so we finally found a spot. We finally take a picture. And then this is what's on our wedding invitations, right? And so it was that caption, right? That context of the frustration, the annoyance, what that moment could have been versus what that moment became. And same with the Six Flags. The weather was good all week. And the day we go to Six Flags, now there's raining. We have to wait. We couldn't go at the time we was going to go. And so we're smiling because, we were just happy. We got ponchos. We just kind of made it work, right? But there was an aspect of like, that was the pretext to the actual picture. And so it was like this component of like, here's the pictures, here's the images, but here's the story behind it. And it was received well. Yeah, it was received well.
Right. No, that makes, and I think that gets to, again, narrative, right? So you were just talking about a little bit of like the role that media has played in kind of the expectation of relationships. Right. And there's this element where like now social media is playing that same role with like, you can arguably say like we have the hashtag relationship goals, right? You have, I remember like just growing up, there would be certain people that when you see an image of them and stuff, like the Obamas, oh my goodness. You're just like,
never saw a couple at that scale.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Just killing the game. Right. Intelligent. They're funny. You know, they have just a great, it seems amazing family. And so, you know, it's not to say that that's not true, right? Like, because it is, you know, to a degree, but it's just that we don't know the behind the scenes. And like, even with President Obama and First Lady Michelle Obama, you know, after the presidency, they were able to kind of speak a little bit more about what was actually going on behind the scenes. And you get to see a different side of them that you're like, wow, like, you know, it has to be hard because you're, you know, running the country, but like you're getting a fuller picture of what actually might have been, you know, going on and the challenges that existed being in that space. And so, you know, of course, on different scales, we all have a different story, you know, and I think, you know, for me, the narrative is important, right? Because the narrative is what sometimes people aspire to. And so we have like on one end, society and media telling a story of perfection in relationships in a sense, like kind of this fairy tale, you know, all of the Disney movies growing up, you know, a lot of them have like a happily ever after type feel to them at the end. And so kind of like kids are growing up thinking that like relationships are supposed to be a very
mystical, magical,
magical. Everything goes really well. You're always happy, and you know, you don't really see all of the hardships portrayed on media. And, you know, of course, there's going to be exceptions to that, right? But nevertheless, for the most part, you know, there's always there's typically a positive depiction. And I think that, you know, kind of what you're hitting on is this aspect where when, you know, we're posting on Instagram or posting different highlights of our relationship, most people aren't going to know the behind the scenes of our relationship. And so the narrative could be that, well, Naomi and Ken, they just got it all together. Like they're just soulmates, you know, which, you know, God did bless us to meet, like, you know, at a young age, and he's blessed our relationship thus far. So there has been amazing moments, but like, you know, what would you say is some of the dangers in not fully telling the full narrative of like the both the highs and the lows?
I mean, because I think what's important about having a complete depiction is that it establishes our expectations. And from those expectations is how we begin to view reality. And I think that disappointment is rooted in those expectations and reality not matching. And I think that when we see a great relationship, right, and we have a list of expectations of what that looks like, and there are negative depictions as well, right? So we kind of have this binary approach, right?
Like very
and so extremes. You have these what looks good, all right, this is good, and then this is bad, and so there's times in which we can mask, because there are genuine red flags, but I think sometimes we can mask the disappointment as a red flag. Somebody not meeting our expectation as a red flag. Somebody misunderstanding what I might say or what you might say. Like there's times in which we're talking past each other. You know, that's not a red flag. That's just this aspect of we have to go through the process of understanding how to communicate to one another. How to receive constructive feedback from one another. Like all of these are arts. And I think that when we're given only one side of the picture, there's no way for us to establish an appropriate expectation to navigate, not if, but when things are no longer smooth, or when there's a rough patch, or when there's a gap in communication or a gap in understanding. And so I think that the danger is that there are people, including ourselves at times, where we'll have an expectation of something that wasn't rooted in reality to get with. And so then when we're using that as the lens in which we're viewing real life, we're met with disappointment after disappointment. And so we try to recreate a narrative. So like they'll see our IG pic and be like, well, the reason why it's working for them is because they just met the right person.
Right.
And so the cycle continues versus... And so I think it's a responsibility on us all. And I guess for you, what responsibility, whether it's, you know, you have younger siblings, you have friends as well who may not be in a relationship. I guess what example do you feel like you have to set or should set? Or how do you feel like you should depict a relationship in order for them to have, I guess you might say, the proper perspective? Because I'm sure you probably get questions. I'm pretty sure they might bring you relationship questions or thoughts or perspectives. What role do you feel like giving them the proper perspective should have in terms of their interpretation of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to kind of like you said, have a idea of like the balance of a relationship, right? That I would be doing an injustice to anyone that asks me, you know, kind of like, well, how's your relationship been, and you know, how do you and Ken, you know, keep moving forward and stay in a healthy relationship? I would be lying to be like, you know, well, everything is peaches and cream, like, because it's not the truth. Like, and so I think that it's vital, and the role is critical to be honest about both sides of, and like you said, really not even just because there are extremes within like how the process of growth, of development, you know, both individually and together, how that all is important to a healthy relationship, and how everyone can have, I feel like a healthy relationship doesn't always have to look like it is healthy all the time, because then that would be a lie too. Like, you know, sometimes you get a scratch and you put a Band-Aid over it, and that heals, and then you're good, right? And so it's not that you have the cleanest bill of health, right? But it's just that there's a recognition that sometimes there's scrapes here and there, and how do you know, address that? And so what I would tell to anyone that, like, you know, is in a relationship or like early on or not in a relationship is that, you know, we have to make room in our mind for the aspect that there is multiple ingredients that have to go in. So you don't just get to a cake by putting flour, you know, you have to have flour, the eggs, the water, the milk, or whatever, like that. Exactly. Facts. You have to have all those ingredients. Then you got to blend it up. Then you have to put it in the pan and put it in the oven. And so there might be some challenges along the way of all of those processes. Like, you know, you might forget the eggs at the store. You know what I mean? How do you respond to that? Do you just, you know, say whatever, we aren't making a cake anymore? Or do you go to the store and say, you know what, we just need to, we have to make an adjustment, but we can go get the eggs and we can still make the cake. And so I think for me, like, it's on, like you said, I think all of us play a role in, you know, setting expectations of a healthy relationship and being honest about, you know, the fact that, like, yes, we're having amazing moments, but also too, we're having moments in which we're growing. And growth oftentimes is not,
it don't feel great.
Always the best. Exactly.
We like the outcome of growth. But maybe not always the process of growth. That's
exactly. And so I think that that's kind of what I feel like the role is to just be honest. And sometimes I feel like, you know, of course, media, they don't necessarily have to do that. You know, they don't have to say like, oh, we're going to make an honest television show.
Because the agenda may not be to educate. Sometimes it's just entertain.
Exactly. But as, you know, real people that are living in this real life, you know, it's like, I don't want people to only see the highlight reel. And that's also too in just anything, because some of the best conversations I've had with people have been like at my lowest, and someone has encouraged me out of that, right? Like they may have been going through something themselves similarly in the past.
Right.
And because they were able to communicate to me like, you know, it's okay. Like this isn't something that you can't get over, can't get through. I was able to kind of see a different side of things. And so I think similarly with relationships, it's like for those who might be having a hard time finding a person, or might be having a hard time in their relationship, you know, like you said, as long as it's not like some of those like real red flags, it's like, you know, you're going to have to work on the communication. We're going to have to work on the selflessness. Like we're going to have to work on the missed cues and all these different pieces. But that's okay. That's okay.
Because to speak on that, because I think what's helped be able to understand the differences between relationship growing pains and red flags is mentorship. Like I think, because actually junior year, I mean, that was actually a big piece for us in college, because I'm pretty sure you remember my reaction to every disagreement. So for those who are listening, every time me and Naomi used to not see eye to eye, I thought this was just like, all right, well, I don't know. I just thought we was about to break up. Like, I thought like every time like we didn't see eye to eye, I'm like, I guess this is where we part way. Part of it was just a disconnect between like, what happens when you disagree and getting to the other side of that.
Right.
There was this aspect where like, I just thought that just means like, okay, we probably gonna. Hey, do you remember what you told me?
You go ahead.
You said, Ken, if every time we get into a disagreement, you think we about to break up, we ain't gonna go nowhere. Like, and it's like, I guess part of it too is like my personality type is this aspect of like, especially if it becomes like somebody really close to me. You know, I can for sure be passionate about some things, but when it comes to something that seems like tension, you know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know what to make of it.
Right.
You know, and so it was a learning process, right? But there's a component where it for me was learning that not seeing eye to eye is not the issue. It's refusing to not understand after we realize we're not seeing eye to eye that becomes the problem.
Right.
Because we're different. And so there's going to be times in which we can look at the same thing and see two different perspectives, right? Because what fuels our perspectives is our experiences, our expectations, and everything in between. And so I think that was a great experience, I guess, for us in the long term, even if it didn't feel great in the moment. But I think back to what I was saying before about the red flags and just relationship growing pains, like unless someone's been there, done that, like it can be hard to see what the other side's going to look like.
Right. Yeah,
and I think that a lot of times, because when you're building a relationship, you don't have experience to always lean on, especially if you started dating young.
Right.
And I think that for us, especially, having certain people in our lives who have been married for some time, that at least helped me to get a perspective of like, this isn't an anomaly. This isn't a red flag. This is, unless you plan on dating another species, if you're dating a human who is imperfect, just like you, there's going to have to be some growing pains. And finding the right one won't change that.
Right.
Because they're still going through some stuff as well. And so because of that, there's a hope that the reality of a great relationship exists at the intersection of meeting the right one. And to me, the right one isn't a person in particular. I think it's anybody who's willing. Anybody who's willing. Willing to what? To die to self, to no longer prioritize self with a relationship, right? I'm going to seek to understand, not just to be understood, right? These are all components of, this might have to be another part too, but these are all components that lead to the ability to get to the other side of, we don't see eye to eye. Versus this aspect of, I can find a person where we always see eye to eye.
Everything is perfect.
Right. We don't even see eye to eye with ourselves.
Right.
Like, I look back at things
so often, to be honest with you.
Like, we look at ourselves 4 or 5 years ago, like, why did I do that?
Right. Facts.
What Facts. Why did I do that? And so that if that exists within, how in the world are we going to expect it to not exist with someone else?
Absolutely.
So when we think about relationships, what's displayed on social media, what's not displayed on social media, what do you think is like one of the common misconceptions when it comes to relationships?
Right. So I think one of the big ones is like how much work is required to have a healthy and successful relationship. When I think about like what I see on social media or just in media in general, you think of like high performing people, individuals that, you know, you think of maybe like a Steph Curry, a LeBron James, a Simone Biles. And these are people that have excelled in their field, that are the greatest in whatever they're doing. And you know, you kind of look at like, what are they doing in order to achieve such success? And, you know, you have like Steph Curry. He gets up 300 to 500 shots after practice. Right. After. You got LeBron, who's investing in his body almost like $1.5 million. Right. In his annually, body, in his training, so that he can be the best that he can. And that's just how much money he's investing. No telling like what that day-to-day looks like for him to be the best at his craft. You have, you know, Simone Biles, who spends 7 hours a day training. That's a long time. You know, and so oftentimes, like, you'll see Steph Curry take that last shot and make it, you know, that last wild three, but it goes in. You'll see LeBron, you know, sprint across the court, dunk. And it's like, whoa, like he's like about to be 40 type situation. You have, you know, Simone Biles, who's like, the way that she's able to perform at the Olympics, you know, and all of that required those unseen hours. It required that investment, that work, that time, that commitment. And I think with relationships, sometimes we see the image, we see a part of like that highlight, and like we aren't thinking about what's going behind that, you know, or what's required for something big. Positive to come from that. And so we're not talking about the investment of marital counseling or relationship counseling or counseling for yourself, so you can understand, just be more self-aware about who you are. We aren't thinking about how much we need to invest in, the time we need to invest in learning how to communicate and how to be patient and all of these different things. And it's like, but that's the things that, like, everything requires repetition. Everything requires work. And relationships is no different. Romantic relationships is no different. Marriage is no different. So I think that's one of the misconceptions, or, you know, what about yourself?
No, I think that you hit it. I don't have any more to add. I think the only piece is the component of when somebody would see a Steph Curry hit that game-winning shot. I don't think the average person would infer that it's just because he had the right ball in his hand. It just so happened that the right ball, in the right geometry. I don't think that there would be this mystical aspect to the fact that he just made this shot, because you would infer some discipline, some hard work. And I think that relationships is one of the ones where you can see an image, but because of the context of relationships in general, how the expectation that has been fueled through all these different mediums, we can see a happy couple and infer ease, it's because they just found the right one. And I think that misconception, I mean, I was fueled by it, in the sense of like, if if we're getting into a disagreement, does that mean we're incompatible, right? Or people do. I've heard this with like sex, why people feel like it's good to have sex before you get married, right? So that you can understand if you're sexually compatible. Now, understanding that sexual compatibility is also a learning process, right? I mean, I guess, you know, if someone has, you know, all the experience in the world, they're just assuming, but each person's body is different, right? And understanding your person will allow for that sexual chemistry to be what you hope it could be. And I think that a lot of it is this aspect of thinking that things just happen. If there's just this magical moment. And I think that there are moments where when we were first dating, like, you know, when we first started 10 years, when we were 18, there was an aspect where it was easy for us to have conversations, right? Casual conversations, but it wasn't easy to have difficult conversations. Right. And so that was something that we needed to work on. Right. And so I think that there's just different pieces. And I think the work is the biggest misconception personally. Yeah.
Right. No, that's good. That's good. So do you have any, you know, soul food?
I do
for
have
us?
some soul food. You know what I'm nervous about?
What?
I love giving people their credit for quotes. And I'm nervous that I might butcher this man's name. You know?
You could put it just on the screen or something.
All right, we'll do that. So this quote is by Zayed Abdulnur. Time decides who you meet in life. Your heart decides who you want in your life. And your behavior decides who stays in your life.
Oh, that hit for me.
So that's today's soul food.
That's good. That's good.
So until next time, you know, we hope that y'all are staying, you know, positive, staying connected. If y'all have any hardships or any difficulties, you know, remember that it requires work. It requires patience, and relationships ain't easy. You know, we're in the middle of learning. Every day is a learning process.
Absolutely.
And so we just hope y'all have a blessed one. Until next time, you know, we hope that y'all stay blessed.
All right. Bye.
I gave him like 3 blessings. You know what I'm saying? It's like I need to define my outro. I said, you know, until next time, I want y'all to stay blessed because, hey, life ain't easy. But I need you to stay blessed. Because if it's hard, you just have to remember to stay blessed. Like, if you don't just close the episode.